Do Republicans stand a chance to flip the governor's mansion in Kentucky? Today on Political Access, we've got a brand new poll out that shows all the Republican frontrunners trailing incumbent Democrat Andy Beshear. So we're going to take a look at this poll, but first of all, this news article outlines what's going on. And as I said, Beshear, he holds leads over all the Republican challengers. Now, this is one of the few notable elections to happen this year. Along with Mississippi and Alabama, these are the only three governor's elections. Now, if you don't already know, even though Kentucky is a pretty red state nationally, they do have a Democratic governor, Andy Beshear. He is the son of former Governor Steve Beshear, and this off-year election is not at all going to be a cakewalk for the Republicans. I never thought it would be, and this latest poll from Mason-Dixon pretty much confirms it's going to be an uphill battle. There's plenty of time for things to happen, but right now I would say this is a leans Democrat type of election. Beshear is regarded as being moderate or conservative, and the state legislature as well as all the other statewide offices are completely dominated by Republicans. So even though there's a supermajority in the legislature, without Beshear there to slow down some of the Republican agenda and make some appointments, the brakes would be completely off for the Republicans, so that is what I think leads to Beshear's popularity. But before we do that, let's jump back to 2019 and see what happened in that election. Well, Andy Beshear was able to knock off incumbent Republican Matt Bevin. It was a very close election, less than a half a point separated the two. Beshear won with under 50% of the vote. Bevin was regarded as controversial and unpopular, and that's what enabled a conservative Democrat with a household name to be able to slip in the door and win that seat. Now, if we take a look at the polling for that race, it's a pretty close race. Trafalgar did have Bevin ahead by 5 points. They were off there. Mason-Dixon, which is the one who polled the current governor's race, they had it tied at 46 apiece. And then they had an earlier poll back in December of 2018. That showed Beshear up by 8. So it's not great news for the Republicans, but again, there's plenty of time for something to change. Now, if we jump back one election before that, 2015, Matt Bevin won election with over 52% of the vote. It was about an 8.5 point margin over Jack Conway. Now, the reason I bring this up is if you take a look at the polling did not really show Matt Bevin winning this thing. A lot of the polling showed Jack Conway ahead slightly or an even race. There was third-party vote from Drew Curtis. There was a decent amount that was undecided. But I remember going into this election, it seemed like Jack Conway was actually going to win this, but the best-case scenario for Matt Bevin was to squeak out a very small victory. Turns out the polling was off pretty substantially, and Bevin won by a decent margin. So that's a little bit of background on the polling in Kentucky. So it's more or less hit or miss when it comes to polling for the governor. Now let's take a look at the current election here, 2023. The primaries are May 16th. So Andy Beshear, he's going to be the nominee. There's a couple of other declared candidates here, but this is purely token opposition. There's no chance Andy Beshear is not going to overwhelmingly be the nominee. So all the focus is going to be on the Republican side, and it is wide open, ton of candidates in the race. So probably the most high profile is Daniel Cameron. He is the Attorney General of Kentucky. Unless a scandal breaks out or something dramatic shifts, it seems likely Cameron is going to be the nominee. So if we go down past this list of candidates, we could see that there's the endorsements, and Donald Trump has already endorsed Daniel Cameron. And I think that even happened a long time ago. So will that Trump endorsement help Cameron? Will it hurt him? Will it have any effect? We'll see what happens. We've also got Kelly Craft in the race. She was the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations under Donald Trump. She got in there after Nikki Haley. She's got endorsements as well. And the candidates don't stop there. But we're seeing what we've seen a lot in recent Republican primaries where there's a lot of candidates, there's bitter infighting, and the winner eventually emerges, and then they have to limp into a general election. And then one thing or another ends up happening. They're unable to unite the different Republican factions. They're not able to get the turnout they need, and then they end up losing in the general election. But if we go down here to the polling, we could see in this recent Mason-Dixon poll, Daniel Cameron, he's at 39%. Kelly Craft is in second place at 13%. Undecided is at 28%. So if we go down to the individual polling, this Mason-Dixon poll shows Andy Beshear leading all of these Republican challengers. The closest matchup is against Daniel Cameron. Beshear is at 49, Cameron is at 40, 11% undecided. And he leads all the other challengers by an even wider margin. So Daniel Cameron is the likely nominee at this point, and he also appears to be the strongest, but even that shows him at a 9% deficit against Beshear. If the election were held right now, I think that there's almost no chance Andy Beshear loses. But Daniel Cameron, he's got some time to build a campaign, improve his name recognition, and create a contrast with Andy Beshear. Now, this poll from Mason-Dixon, it was done with 625 registered voters. And if we look a little deeper into it, we can look at Andy Beshear's approval rating. In January 2023, it's at 61%, 29% disapprove, 10% not sure. Now, those are stellar approval ratings. There's no chance any governor is going to lose if he's at a 60% approval rating. And that rating has only gone up over the last couple of years. And then down here we have the statewide name recognition. Only 4% don't recognize Andy Beshear, 17% don't recognize Daniel Cameron. And Cameron's favorability ratings here are 30%, 18% unfavorable. And there's some further breakdown crosstabs here on Governor Beshear's approval rating. So again, 61% approve. That's a pretty consistent rating across all the different regions in Kentucky. If you go by gender, it's higher with women, but even with men, it's at 55%. It's very similar with voters under 50 and over 50. And by party registration, he even has a 41% approval with Republicans, 46% disapprove. Independents are 53 approve, 38 disapprove. So he almost has half of the approval of the Republicans. Nobody's going to lose if they're getting that much support from the opposition party. The last thing we could do is take a look at the demographic breakdown for this poll. 44% Democrat, 46% Republican, 10% Independent or other. So what is the conclusion from this poll? Well, I think it confirms what we already pretty much knew, and that is moderate conservative Andy Beshear, he's the front runner in this deep red state. I think a lot of it is what I said earlier. Everything other than the governor's mansion is very Republican. Sometimes voters want somebody from the opposite party at the top of the ticket to balance out the political power in the state. We've seen it in other states as well. Louisiana, Democratic governor. Massachusetts and Maryland, they had Republican governors, but the rest of the state, very, very blue. So even though it's a red state, a lot of the Republicans there, they're going to be disappointed by this poll. But I definitely do not think the Democrats should get complacent here. The last thing they should do is think that just because they have a moderate Democrat, that they don't need to do anything else. That might be enough. We have to see if Daniel Cameron will actually be the Republican nominee. Then we have to see what kind of political environment there is, and then how these campaigns end up playing out. Maybe a scandal develops. Maybe there's a lot of Republican infighting, and Andy Beshear wins by 20 points. And even though Kentucky is technically a very red state, they've only elected 2 Republican governors going back to 1971, and both of them were defeated in their re-election bids. So as I said, sometimes states, they want a little bit of balance when it comes to their governors. And I think both of the bases are really unsatisfied with Andy Beshear. The Trump base thinks Andy Beshear is not a moderate at all. He tries to play one, but on a lot of issues, he does go to the left. And then on the other side, progressives think Andy Beshear is a terribly weak Democrat, and they also want nothing to do with him. So it's an interesting mix, but in this case, most voters are a big fan of that kind of dynamic. Right now, I think Andy Beshear is the favorite. Could something change in a few months? Absolutely. It's going to be an interesting race to watch. It's going to be a tough pickup for the Republicans, but let me know in the comments, what do you think about this Kentucky governor's race? What do you think the chances are the Democrats are able to hold this seat? And what do you think about the poll that just came out? Let me know down below. And on your way out, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next video.